Welcome to the Peaceful Parenting Podcast. I'm your host, Sarah Rosensweet, mom of 3 young people, peaceful parenting coach, and your cheerleader and guide on all things parenting. Each week, we'll cover the tools, strategies, and support you need to end the yelling and power struggles and encourage your kids to listen and cooperate so that you can enjoy your family time. I'm happy to say we have a great relationship with our 3 kids. The teen years have been easy and joyful, not because we're special unicorns, but because my kids were raised with peaceful parenting. I've also helped so many parents just like you stop struggling and enjoy their kids again. I'm excited to be here with you today and bring you the insight and information you need to make your parenting journey a little more peaceful. Let's dive into this week's conversation. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Peaceful Parenting Podcast. Today, I have Corey with me. I think you all know Corey. Corey is one of the coaches that I trained who works with me, and you see her in the Facebook group and in our membership. And some of you have probably even worked with her as a coach. Welcome, Corey.
Thanks for having me back today.
Yeah, it's so good to talk to you. Today, we are going to be talking about something that actually comes up a lot, but we don't actually talk about it a lot because usually we talk about what parents could or should say, right? Like what, even Ned Johnson has the book, Ned and Bill have the book, What Do You Say, right? Because so many parents want to know, like, what do you say? Or what should I say? Or whatever. And we actually started talking about when you shouldn't talk, when you should stop talking. And you and I think we were on the phone and we were talking about, like, we started thinking of all these examples of when you should stop talking, I said, let's do a podcast episode about it.
And I keep laughing at this. I'm like, we need to talk about how much parents need to stop talking.
Yeah, totally. So it's kind of like a little bit counterintuitive about stopping talking instead of what you should say. So I thought we could just kind of go back and forth and in no particular order talk about the times when we should stop talking and just kind of talk about those. So do you want to, or maybe I'll start us off. And as I said, these are not in order of like most important to least important, but they are in order that I thought of them. So when I was thinking, okay, when is a time when we should stop talking? One of the things that I think we need to stop talking is when kids are really engrossed in play. Often either we interrupt them because we need to tell them it's almost time to go. And of course that there are times when we do need to interrupt play. I'm not saying we can never interrupt play, but like maybe watch for a minute and see if you can find like a little bit of a break in the play, because play is so fundamental to their development and it's like the work and language of childhood. And if they're really engrossed in something, just like you would an adult, right? Like if you see your partner is like really engrossed in something, you might wait for like a good break point to say like, hey, it's almost time for dinner. So I think that's one time when parents interrupt kids when they're playing. And then I think another time is just to connect, right? Like we see what they're doing and we want to connect with them. So we like make a comment about it or ask them a question about their play. And if you're playing with them, then that's one thing. But if you're just kind of doing something and then you're interrupting them to make a comment about their play, I think it can just be a little bit intrusive and like get in the flow. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I feel like the one that I notice the most with clients I work with is interrupting them because they're like, we're going to be eating dinner soon is like that perfect example. And what I often tell parents too is if you have to interrupt them, try and keep the play going.
I love that.
We have to think about if it doesn't have to be talking or coming in with your whole adultness. It can be kind of sliding in as part of their world to carry that forward.
Right.
So I think that's part of it too, is we just always have our adult talk that comes in. And if we do have to intrude, try and stay in their world.
Right. I love that. What's on your list?
Okay, so this is a big one, and it's when kids experience a natural consequence, we don't have to make it a teachable moment. One of your first podcasts was actually titled, We Don't Have to Make It a Teachable Moment. That was a long time ago, though.
We can link to that podcast.
Okay, perfect. But the idea here is we're so tempted when something, you always use this great example of you had a nephew who left out Pokemon cards and they got wet. And then I think, someone kind of piled on about that. Like, oh, if you hadn't left them outside, they wouldn't be ruined now, But the thing is, for that child, just his precious Pokemon cards getting wrecked would teach him the lesson of what he needed to do next time. Mm-hmm. And when you first taught me that, my kids weren't into Pokemon. And since I now realize what a huge natural consequence that would have been, right? There's no need to pile on and make them feel more bad.
Yeah.
Instead, we want to get quiet and just feel empathy for them. Maybe there's something we've all, wrecked our car. Like the other day, I knocked an entire smoothie all over my nice cream colored carpet.
Oh, no.
I didn't need anyone coming in and telling me this is why, Corey, you
Well,
shouldn't be
yeah,
drinking
Corey,
smoothies.
if you hadn't left it on the table there, then yeah.
I had it on the ground with me.
Oh.
I've now
Lesson
since
learned.
implemented from my own natural consequence. I've since learned I'm now only having smoothies with a lid on it, but I didn't need anyone to come in and tell me that. I learned that from experiencing the absolute agony of making that big mistake and then spending hours cleaning it, and it's still not looking great anymore.
Aw. Well, and I think sometimes, like, you said we don't need to pile on and make them feel bad. And I think sometimes there is that, like, we want to say something to make them feel bad. But most of the time, I think it's like, oh, well, I've got to tell him if he had cleaned up his Pokemon cards when I reminded him, then they wouldn't have been left out in the rain and they wouldn't have gotten wet. But the kid already knew that, right? And for you, like, well, I've got to tell Corey, don't put it on the ground next to you. But you're like, duh, I learned that by spilling it when it was on the ground next to me. So most of the time, we don't have to say anything because the child already, and of course, you can ask yourself, is there an information gap here? And if there is, then you want to be talking and not talking. But if, and maybe not at the moment, which I know you're going to talk about that as one of your points, but really ask yourself, like, do they really not know why this thing happened? Like, do I really need to say anything? Or is it just because I think I need to reinforce the lesson? And I think just as like a little sidebar, the danger of trying to reinforce that natural consequence or reinforce the lesson is that they can then turn their regret or remorse or upset about the thing that's happened against you, right? And then that actually can prevent them from learning from the natural consequence because they're like, my mom's so mean, like she doesn't understand how important these are to me. And, you know, whatever, they can like kind of turn that regret and remorse into something against you if you've piled on after the natural consequence.
Yeah, and we want to be that person that they come to when they've had big natural consequences as that source of support, that person who's going to love me and make me feel a good person no matter what mistake I've made. So that's why we really just have to like bite our tongue. And the real big piece in that too is you need to regulate yourself because often you start feeling like it's an emergency too because you may have spent money on buying them for them, or you also just feel so bad for them too that you start to get activated.
Totally. Another time I think that we should stop talking, and actually I read about this in the Hunt Gather Parent book by, oh my gosh, I'm totally blanking on her name, Michaeline DeClef. Yes.
Yes.
And she says that often kids, we give them unnecessary direction. Like we're just always like, do this. Now it's time for this. Now it's time for this. And she actually challenged, I think my sister tried this, challenged herself to note how many times in an hour she was giving a directive to her child. And she and my sister were sort of both shocked at like how many times you're kind of stepping in and telling them what to do or how to do something. But that's, I mean, A, annoying. And B, I think they start to tune you out if you're just always, like this blah, 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 like the Peanuts cartoon in the background. And C, I think taking away some of their autonomy and their self drive, right? Like you can read in psychology literature about how as autonomy rises, so does that sense of being driven, right? Like they're related to each other. The more autonomy you have, the more you have independence and drive to do something.
Yes. And I think it was from you. I think this is actually a you thing that I learned. And it's you can just direct kids to one general thing instead of telling them every single thing they need to do. So being like, where are we at on the list when
Right.
they're getting ready for bed or getting ready for school? Because everyone knows what the lists and steps are.
Right. Or maybe
So
they don't. I mean, maybe that's something they go back to, but you're right. That's something we did when my kids were little. We had the bedtime 3, which were pajamas, last pee, and brush teeth. And so I would say, are you 3 for 3? Or they would come to me and say, I'm 3 for 3. But instead of like the constant, like, have you done this yet? Have you done this yet? Have you done that? I have time to do this, time to do this, giving them some of that autonomy. Like, where are you on the list? You're just checking in with them.
yes. So, and I know when I've told that to clients and even in my own home, that's so much less stressful than micromanaging each step in
Mhm.
having to tell them everything they're doing.
Yeah, and so I guess like a part of the not talking or stop talking is ask questions instead of giving the directions, right?
Yes.
Or just be quiet and observe and see where they're at. And, with that the whole thing with Michaeline DeClef and how many directives we are giving children that, I think I heard somewhere that the average child is given a command like 200 times a day.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Can you imagine?
No wonder they're exhausted.
Yeah. Yeah. So, another thing I have on my list is something I learned from Alfie Kohn when, he talks a lot about why we shouldn't praise children. And one of the things that he talks about, maybe we can link to this in the show notes too, his article called 5 Reasons to Stop Saying Good Job, which talks about this. And I think it's a great introduction into that idea of not praising. And one thing that he says is that sometimes when kids say they are trying to make it to the top of the monkey bars themselves, and they are not the top, make it across the monkey bars themselves. And if they do it, and of course we're excited for them and they do it, but we make a big deal about it, like, oh my gosh, you did it, blah, blah, blah. And we're like so excited and talking a lot, it can actually take away from their own pleasure for having made the accomplishment. Like we're making it too much about us by talking too much, right? So
Yes.
just like he calls it stealing children's pleasure. So if your child is doing something that, they accomplish something or they're doing something that they love or they're good at, sometimes and of course I'm not saying that we never want to be like, yeah, you did it. But I want us to be conscious of if we're talking too much in those moments, it can shift the focus from them to us, right? So we want to always keep it about them and not about us. And so sometimes just like not saying anything, but like just having a smile on your face when they accomplish something or they have a success.
It strikes me that in many of these cases, we're also not saying don't talk at all. We're saying pause,
Yeah. Yes.
right? We're
Be
saying
more
pause.
thoughtful. Yeah.
So in that case, I know I just watched my son do this the other day. We were in this like really cool park and he was working away on the monkey bars. And I just sat back and waited. And I watched him do it and come down and just be like, yes, like he did the actual arms waving. He was so excited. And I just paused sitting there. And then all of a sudden, after he had his moment, he looked at me and we both just gave each other big smiles. And then off he went again. So by pausing and not getting right in there, he just like basked in his own glory. And then we still connected and he could see I was watching and paying attention. And then off he went again. So I don't know, there's something special about those quiet engagements together without having to fill it up with noise.
Love that. And he just got to experience his own pleasure getting it. So I think the next thing on your list is probably the biggest, like, a lot of the things that we've been talking about are a little bit kind of tweaks. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like kind of tweaks. But I think that the one that I know your biggest one that we talk about all the time is probably the one that's the most sort of crucial of any of the sort of stop talking points that we're going to make in this podcast. Do you want to take that one away?
Is
It's-
zones of regulation.
Yeah.
Okay, so I find the zones of regulation really helpful for being a guide of knowing when we should be talking and when we should not be talking. For anyone who doesn't know, they were one of the early people, I think, who it's a company by themselves. Occupational therapists use them a lot, but they're one of the early.
Schools use them too. Like yes, your kids might know about the zones from their classroom. And it's really polyvagal theory, right?
Yes, it's polyvagal theory that they've then put into almost like traffic lights for helping parents better understand what regulation looks like.
Nervous
And what
system regulation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what's really cool is they talk about it as in all zones are neutral because your body needs to experience every zone, in order to get through life, but they're necessary at different times. And by getting tuned into knowing your child's zones, it's easier for you to know how to attune to them and also help them. So very quickly for people who don't know, there's green zone, which means your child's regulated and ready to learn. There's blue zone. Blue zone would be like low energy. Blue zone is super appropriate at bedtime. And often, actually, my kids have a really excited zone before they get to blue zone, but blue zone's appropriate for like when you want to sleep or that type of thing, but it's not appropriate when you're in gym class. Green zone, ready to learn. Then we have the other zones, and this is what we actually end up talking about a lot more, is yellow zone is when you're often in a state of excitement. And then red zone is like you're in a state of an emergency.
Well, I think red zone, so the way I learned it was yellow zone was more just like you're not quite at red zone, but you're also not at green zone. It's got sort of on the way to getting dysregulated. And I learned that like you can be in the red zone from upset or excitement. Like you can be totally just, think of kids at a birthday party, like just totally like bouncing off the walls. So do you think that's fair to think of it that way? Or do you think it really is more just yellow is excited, upset, excited dysregulation, and red is upset dysregulation?
I saw it more as red zone is the emergency state of like your body is like fully hijacked.
Okay.
So that totally can come from being
Yeah.
excited or any emotion. It just
Yeah.
means that you're kind of fully hijacked.
Right.
You're in fight or flight at that point.
Yeah. So yellows, I think is fair to say is kind of, you're not quite fully hijacked, but you're also not fully regulated.
Yeah, and we need yellow zone for when we're playing sports or, when we're writing a test, you're almost kind of somewhere between green and yellow, right? Because you have to be like really in that heightened state.
Right. That makes sense.
Yeah, so they're fluid. You kind of go back and forth and you can be in different layers of them. But basically, with the client recently, I was saying what we've realized the biggest problem is people are always trying to talk to their kids when they're in late stage, like yellow zone or red zone.
Right.
And that is the time more than ever where you need to stop talking.
Right.
And I think that's the hardest thing for parents because this is often their kids are maybe really arguing with them or having a meltdown or getting aggressive. There's all the things on that continuum of what it looks like when they're in fight or flight. And parents often are trying to talk them out of their feelings to get them to calm down or trying to do all sorts of different things. And what we've realized is that is the time more than ever when we need to actually stop talking and focus on our own regulation and, whatever we need to do to keep everyone safe and things like that. But the real big thing is that's more than ever when we have to stop talking and focus actually on just being the calm.
Yeah. Or taking a break. Because you're there when you're in red zone or your child's in red zone, your thinking brain is actually like offline, right? Like you can't, I can think about any fights my husband and I have ever gotten in when we're dysregulated. We never ever have solved a fight. Like we've never ever come to like something like a solution when we're upset. Like it always takes taking a break, calming down, and then talking about it later because we're both just so like if we get in a fight, we're both so hijacked that your brain can't access that you can't access that part of your brain that is rational and logical and thinking of solutions. And so often parents are like their kids having a total meltdown and they're trying to talk to them about why we're not going to buy a toy or why we're not going to, do this thing or why they should be doing something else instead and trying to explain things.
Yes. Or trying to use strategies like regulation strategies. So, like, you just need to take a deep breath.
Right. Right.
Or why don't we go to our calming corner? Like,
Mm.
you're kind of like trying to suggest, or we need to talk to our worry brain. All of the really great strategies that we know help with regulation actually only work when you're in like early yellow zone.
Right. Or coming
You know,
back out of the red. And I
yes.
think, I often say the only thing that makes a person want to calm down is feeling understood. And sometimes the best way to make somebody feel understood is just to be quiet and just be with them. And that's not, yeah. And I would talk about empathy a little bit more afterwards, but really just focusing on like being with somebody and calming yourself and radiating some compassion towards them is the only thing that helps them get out of that red zone.
It's true. And I think I've said this before on the podcast, but in case I haven't, when my son was really in the red zone, sometimes he couldn't even look at my face.
Mhm.
Like my face would trigger him. Like, you're making that face. Like my empathy on
I
my
remember
face
that.
would be too much, even because whether or not I was speaking or he could see it on my face, it had the same effect. So I had to learn to like look away from him and send the calm because not only could I not talk, I couldn't let him see my face.
Right. It was too intense.
Too intense.
Yeah.
So that's why we have to really think about, and this is so hard for parents because a child who's really in the red zone, scary for you. It's really scary for you. Really, honestly, this all you have is make them stop is going on in your head. You're like, I just want this to stop. I want them to
Right.
calm down. I want them to be okay. This needs to be over.
Yeah. Yeah. And the urge to do something. Like,
Yes.
because that also happens too when we get a little dysregulated, you wanna do something, right? And you wanna do something, you wanna say something, you wanna, like, make it better, get them to stop melting down, and just really that urge is the opposite of what you need to do in that moment.
Yeah, and just know, like we said, that urge is actually our own fight or flight asking us to take action most of the time too.
Mm.
So yes, that's why we have to like really that's our sign to just we have to
Wait.
regulate ourselves and wait.
Yeah, and the WAIT, that's actually the acronym people sometimes say. WAIT stands for "Why am I talking?" So, yeah. Why am I talking? WAIT. So, I think that could be like a really good thing for all of these things, right? Like, because you said what we were just talking about is often it's a pause in all of these situations, right? So, pause, wait, why am I talking? And a lot of times it's like, don't talk, don't say anything right now.
I have never heard that.
No?
That is the absolute best.
Yeah. So, why am I talking? And, I think that sometimes when our kids are upset like that, and this actually is another thing that we were going to talk about, is sometimes kids will say, like, stop talking or whatever. And that actually came up in today's office hours and in last week's office hours in our membership. One of our members was saying last week that her child, they were like on their way home from school and he was having a big meltdown on the street. And she did a good job of just like, kind of staying calm and stuff. And then he finally was like, "I'll only come with you if you don't talk. Don't talk to me. Don't say anything." And she did it. But then she asked me, she's like, "Is that okay?" I felt like he was like bossing me around or something. Like it made her a little uncomfortable. Like she felt like maybe I shouldn't have agreed to that. And I was like, no, that sounds totally fine. Like he was telling you what he needed, which was for you to not talk, right? And that came up again today with another person with a smaller child whose kid was saying, shut up, which is, not the most polite way to say stop talking. But I said to that member, I was like, maybe that's a sign to you that you are talking too much when he's upset and he's telling you, like, I can't take this in. I don't, there's too much, it's too intense. I can't take it in. I need you to stop talking. Right. So maybe just stop talking earlier in the process.
Yes. Well, and that's kind of like with the zones, right? Is we can teach them and talk to them in the green zone. We can a bit in the yellow zone, but we can't in the red zone. So
At
it's
all.
kind of
Yeah.
whatever parents need to know for like what are these little tricks that will help them to remember what their child needs in the moment.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and I think, just that we always have to remind ourselves because it can be hard to wait and stop talking and pause. If there's anything you need to teach them, if it really is a teachable moment, and again, most of the time it's not, and they already know what they did was wrong or what the problem was with whatever. But if it really is a teachable moment, you can address it in an hour. You can address it
Yes.
that night. You can address it the next day, right? Like, and in fact, that's when the learning will happen is after the child is calm and if you weren't calm also, after you're calm.
Yes, exactly.
Think a lot of the times when people are wanting when we're talking too much when they're upset is because we're hoping if we can just explain it to them, they'll understand and they'll stop being upset. Like, so if we can explain well enough why we're not going to go to the park after school, then they'll be like, oh, great, mom or dad, I get it. I'm not upset anymore. But that pretty much never happens. Like, it's not that they don't understand why. They're just upset about not being able to go to the park.
Yes. Okay, that's the perfect segue to the one that I was going to talk about. And this is we over explain ourselves when we're setting limits. We over explain ourselves. And so basically, you and I have talked a lot about this, about how we need to think long and hard. A lot of parenting happens before we're in these situations. And so this is a perfect example of we need to not be just setting arbitrary limits. We want to make sure that we've thought long and hard about what limits we're actually setting. And that in general, our default is that we collaborate with our kids instead of telling them what to do all the time.
Yeah.
And that philosophy is all about talk less, really, when you think of it. Sometimes we do have to set limits. And that's the thing we really need to stop doing is thinking if I just explain this well enough to them, they're gonna like that limit and accept it and they won't be upset
Well,
anymore.
share your example you shared with me from yesterday.
Yeah. Okay. So yesterday we went to the zoo and it was my first time as a family going to the zoo and it is really expensive. So we told our kids ahead of time that in order to meet our budget, we were going to bring a packed lunch and we would buy them. It was really cold. So we would buy them a hot chocolate while we were there to warm up while we were walking around. But other than that, we were not going to be buying anything else.
And can I just say the fact that today is June 2nd and yesterday was June 1st and it was really cold we have had such a cold spring so far. And you had to buy hot chocolate at the zoo on June 1st.
We did. Yeah. We were all holding it to like try and warm up as we were shivering.
Oh my goodness. Okay, sorry. Go ahead. That was just funny because I was like, people are going to think we're taping this in the winter. But
I
no,
know.
today's June 2nd.
I know, it was really strange. So that was our agreement ahead of time was that was the only thing, and I warned them that when we were there, the zoo was gonna try and get us to spend money at every turn. There was gonna be food vendors and stuffies and everything, and respectfully, the answer is no, because it's not in the budget. And when we got there, they found that really hard. Throughout the day, they wanted everything. And first of all, your voice was in my head, totally normal for kids to want everything.
Yeah.
But
It doesn't mean that they're, oh my gosh, what's the word? Brain fog. Entitled just because they're
yeah,
asking for everything. Yeah. It is
just
small.
normal kids and everything smelled amazing and the stuffies did look great. So I totally understand why they wanted everything. And we had to just keep being like, I know that is the cutest stuffy of all time, but sorry, sweetie, not today. I know that ice cream looks amazing, but not today. And that was just our line. And there were times when they got really upset. A lot of very dramatic, like, you never buy us anything. I'm never going to have experience the taste of cotton candy. And like, just, you know, and I so badly wanted to keep talking and just be like, you're holding in your hand the hot chocolate. I just bought you.
Right. Or we already agreed to this and now you're complaining, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. We're not gonna come back if you're just gonna complain the whole time. Like all of these words were just like playing in my head. And I had to just keep like taking deep breaths and being like, I know that looks amazing.
Well, and this is
Okay.
a perfect example of that cultivating nonchalance when they're upset that I sent a newsletter about a couple weeks ago and just not, getting, I think part of the explaining too much was like what I said, that you want them to not be upset, right? Which is kind of acting like their feelings are an emergency, which teaches them that their feelings are an emergency. So just like, you're empathetic, but you're also like not making a huge deal about it and trying to get them to remember what they agreed to or see that they had the hot chocolate or whatever.
Yes. And let's refer listeners back. You just did an amazing coaching call about this too. I think it might have been last week's episode about cultivating nonchalance.
Yes, that's right.
And I realize how important that is because like I have such a deep well of empathy that sometimes I can have too much empathy for my kids. Whereas my husband is so much better, just kind of be like, not today, off
Yeah.
you go.
Right, right.
Yeah. So I had to really channel him and just like close my mouth and keep on walking and just kind of casually let them know, like, I get it, but not today. And
Right.
that can be hard for me too. So for any parents who do find that hard, like the overdo the empathy, I had to really work at that. Not saying too much and just being a bit nonchalant about the whole thing.
Totally. Another thing that just occurred to me about for stopping talking is what Lynn Lyons calls the safety chatter about like, be careful, don't step there. Like she has this story where she talks about going hiking and with her family, and there was another family that was like just ahead of them. And she said that for the entire hike, she could hear one of the parents telling the child to be careful over and over again. And that safety chatter is Lynn talks about it, making kids anxious. And B, I think that they would tune you out also, right? I mean, I think those are probably opposite ends of the continuum of what could happen. Either they're listening to you too much and they're like seeing the world as a dangerous place, or they're ignoring you because you're telling them to be careful when there's nothing to be careful about. So I think that's another time to stop talking is really like ask yourself, if they like tripped over a route on this hiking trail, are they really going to get super hurt? Or can we just like be quiet and let them learn, how to put their feet? And B, if there really is something that is dangerous, how can we say it in a much more specific way that's more helpful instead of just like the be careful thing?
Yes, that's a perfect example. I actually observed that a lot at the zoo yesterday
Yeah.
too, right?
Yeah. Like we might say, like, there are a lot of roots, tree roots on this trail. So as you're walking, keep an eye out for the roots and try not to trip on them. Right. You might say that in the beginning. And then, you might say, like, oh, lots of roots coming up or something. If there really is something that you need to draw their attention to, but just like be careful, it's like going to make them anxious or ignore you.
Yeah, I remember Lynn saying too, I used her advice yesterday where I told each of the kids what their plan was before if they got separated from us, like who the people were. And then I gave them the freedom of like, you need to be able to see me at all times. But you don't have to be locked by me. We don't have to be terrified, right? So
Mhm.
they had the freedom to kind of explore without me constantly kind of come closer, watch out, blah, blah, like all of that stuff. So for sure, yesterday, I bit my tongue a lot yesterday.
Yeah. Good. Good. And I mean, I think that's good for us, right? So that leads me to the last thing on my list. I don't know if you had anything else on your list,
No,
but
that's it.
yeah, the last thing on my list was to stop talking when kids have a problem or, have an issue or a problem or something that they're either something they're upset about or something that happened that they're trying to figure out what to do. And what I see commonly are two areas, like two different reasons why we talk too much in those situations. So, say your kid's really upset about something. Often we like talk too much. We go because we're going into fix it mode of like what they could do or, how to make it better because we're anxious about them being upset. Right. So we're talking a lot and trying to fix it to like take care of our own feelings of our child, say somebody like said that they couldn't sit with them at lunch or something like that. And we might be like so worried about their feelings that we're talking too much, either trying to like excuse it, like, oh, they probably didn't mean it or whatever. We're like just trying to fix the feelings by talking too much. Or, you know, well, I don't know. Do you have anything to say about that before I say the second way parents talk too much when there's a problem?
Oh, I just agree with you. That comes up a lot. And I feel like, especially with friend dynamics, because parents have all their own anxieties about their own experiences with friends and those kinds of drama going up. And you just wrapped up your teen course. I'm sure that this becomes bigger and bigger as they have bigger problems.
Yeah, totally. And that sort of was what I was going to say too. But also, we've mentioned the membership a lot. If anyone wants to join us in the membership, it is both of our, I think we can both say it's one of our favorite things about the business is the membership and how much we love the community and inside of our membership. So if anyone wants to check it out, you can go to reimaginepeacefulparenting.com/membership. We'll also put that in the show notes, but it's a really special place. And yeah, one of the parents actually today was talking about her daughter and some friend troubles, and she said that was sharing a win, and she said that she didn't jump in with the fixing it of trying to like make her daughter feel better. She just listened instead, right? And I was like, that is so awesome. Because we do want to go in and like make them feel better and we end up talking too much because we're trying to make them feel better. But I remember one time my daughter, she said, well, I often would go in with trying to see it from the other person's perspective, oh, well, so and so probably did that because her parents are getting divorced and she's having a hard time or whatever. And I would always, because I wanted to try to make my daughter be able to have empathy for the other person. But one time she said to me, when you do that, it really makes me feel like you're not on my team. And it made me realize I just had to listen more. So I wasn't trying to fix it, but I was trying to get her to see from a different perspective. But it just made me realize like, I just need to listen, right? Like, stop talking. Don't say anything. Just listen. Whether it's, makes you have to sit with your own anxiety or makes you have to just, quote, be on your child's team and just listen to their point of view. So much when they're upset, we just have to listen.
Yeah, that's such good advice.
Yeah. The other big area where I see parents talking too much when a kid has a problem is jumping in with solutions. And this is something we definitely talked about a lot in the teen course, which is asking yourself, okay, whose problem is it? Right? And as kids get older, less and less you want to jump in with I mean, I would say you never want to jump in with solutions, but when they're older, it's even more important because we want them to be developing those problem solving skills as they're getting older and, not we're the consultant, not the manager anymore. But what I see is that parents, we often have our own great ideas for what they should do. Well, what you really need to do is go back into that store and tell the person blah, blah, blah. And instead, why am I talking? Ask your child, what do you think you should do in this situation? Right. And if they really don't have any ideas, then you could say something like, well, I have some thoughts. Do you want to hear them? Right. So asking, they're always going to be more receptive to your ideas of what they should do if you ask for permission first to share your ideas. So just that, like being cautious about when they have a problem, jumping in with solutions, because we do have more life experience, more perspective. We do often have good ideas, but if we're always jumping in with them, it's going to make them feel like they're not competent, and it's going to rob them of the experience of their own problem solving experience.
Yes. And I love how you said, like, asking, like, I have some thoughts. Do you want to hear them? And they can learn to say no.
Yes. Yeah. And they
And then
might
you're
say
like,
no. And
okay.
then you really have to shut up. They say
Yeah.
no.
And I think that's really great. Like, cause like, I think the epitome of a safe relationship is that if someone says no and you listen. And so that's something I've been really inspired by. Vivek Patel is always encouraging your kids to say no to you. But I think if we actually wait, sometimes they don't have to say no. You just give them that pause where they can, like really think about what they want to ask you or say there.
Yeah, totally. And also, this is kind of a little bit of a sidebar point, but if you aren't giving your solutions and then their ideas, you can see how they might be quite problematic. And you can say something like, well, what do you think would happen if you did that? Right. Or what do you think would happen if you said that? So you can always like still asking good questions instead of talking at them about, oh, no, you shouldn't do that because blah, blah, blah. Right. So it's like a version of, asking instead of talking.
So the big themes that have emerged here are we're actually not saying a lot of the time it's not just don't say anything.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually pause or ask more questions than just say what to do. Instead of giving commands, you're asking more questions.
Yeah, or think about timing. I think those are sort of like the three things of like, do I really need to say anything here? So that pause, and it might be that you do, but at a different time, right? So yeah, or you can ask a question instead of saying something, or maybe it's that you don't have to talk at all, and you can just let them be in the moment.
I know you love Venn diagrams, but I feel like we really need to make a flow chart here.
No, I think that's a good point. You can do
And
that.
it always ends with stop talking.
Yeah, no, totally. The flowchart would be fun. If anyone listening is like someone who likes to do illustrations or charts, and you want to make a flowchart of our stop talking episode, we would love to see it.
Yes.
Well, thanks, Corey.
Thank you.
So for anyone, check out our membership, reimaginepeacefulparenting.com/membership. Corey and I also both have availability for coaching. If you think that you want to get some coaching, you can reach out and we can do a free short consult. All of that is available on our website, reimaginepeacefulparenting.com. And if you thought this was a helpful episode and you would like to share it with a friend, we would super appreciate that. And as always, make sure that you're following the show wherever you get your podcasts so you don't miss an episode. And we would love it if you gave us a 5-star rating and reviewed us on Apple Podcasts. I think Apple's the only place still that you can leave reviews, but maybe I should check that because I always say Apple. But maybe you can leave reviews on other platforms now too. I'm not sure.
I'm not sure either.
All right. But we want to know how you feel about the show. So find a way to let us know. And it always helps us to find more listeners, and we can reach more people and make more change in the world, the more families that are practicing peaceful parenting. So thank you, Corey, and thank you, parents and caregivers, for being with us today.
All right, we'll stop talking.
Okay, bye. Stop talking. Sorry, one more thing, and not stop talking yet. When my sister and I were little, we used to talk, and at some point we would realize that we really need to go to sleep. So we would say, 1, 2, 3, stop talking. Okay, so maybe you and I should do that. Okay, ready?
Yeah.
1, 2, 3, stop
1, 2, 3,
talking.
stop talking.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode. I hope you found this conversation insightful and exactly what you needed in this moment. Be sure to subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast platform and leave us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts. Remember that I'm rooting for you. I see you out there showing up for your kids and doing the best you can. Sending hugs over the airwaves today. Hang in there. You've got this.